What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Optimize You. We are helping you optimize every single area of your life. And today we have an amazing podcast. We're going to talk about everything you need to know about skyrocketing your weights in the gym. So I know for me, Matt, we love pushing some fucking weight. And I know over the years, I'm speaking for myself, I'm assuming I'm speaking for Matt as well, like we've seen our weights go up dramatically through doing a bunch of different stuff. So we're going to go through all of those different items that you can start doing within your life, at the gym, with your diet, with your recovery, all of that stuff to help you start to increase those weights and get that fucking shit going. And so,
yeah.
And also, if you are enjoying the podcast, we do this every episode, but we'd appreciate it if you would rate us, if you would subscribe. If this is your first episode, welcome. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our future episodes that we drop every Tuesday and Thursday. And, if you like this, make sure you share the pod with somebody who you think could benefit from it. We're going to continue giving you guys awesome content every week, stuff that is really close to our hearts. And so we appreciate you watching. And let's get into the pod. What's going on, brother?
Yeah, man. I'm excited about this one because this is right up my alley. This is one that clients ask me a lot about. This is one that I personally care a lot about. I take myself back 10, 15 years ago, even further. Like, this is the stuff I wanted to know. This is the stuff that I had questions about. This is the stuff where I was like, man, how do I get strong? How do I get jacked? How do I move more weight? And how do I do so successfully, injury free, so I can just live like a badass, right? You and I both played sports. So it was like, okay, for me, I know once the transition out of sports was like, dude, I'm just going to eat weights. And that's what I want to do. I want to get better at it. I want to learn more about it. I want to engulf myself in it. So dude, I'm excited to jam on this one today. How about you?
Oh, dude, I'm pumped. I know we just kind of got this topic and I started getting excited about it. And I was like, we got to do it today. Because I think this is something that a lot of people are going to benefit from. And I mean, it's just that, especially, like you said, us being athletes, it's that competition with ourselves within the gym. It's one of those areas. That's why I love lifting. That's one of the reasons I love lifting. Obviously, there's endless benefits to it, but that's one of the reasons I love lifting. And also golf. Like, it's a source of competition with myself that I can, I'm chasing a PR. I'm chasing a best score at the golf course. And so this is going to be good. And I think we're going to talk about things that maybe people aren't doing, right? I think that we're going to talk about things that people haven't really thought of when it comes to this, especially the newbie, right? The somebody who's listened to this podcast and they're new to it. And I'm curious to, like, what would you say is like kind of the number one thing for you? Like, let's go outside of the gym, right? Like, let's not talk about progressive overload. We'll go there, like, and how you can kind of set up your training to increase your weights and skyrocket those weights. What would you say is number one for you when it comes to outside of the gym, helping you hit PRs?
I think you have to know what your fuel source is. You got to know what you're consuming. You got to have awareness around that. Like, I'd rate close, not even second place, but I think it goes hand in hand with sleep. You maximize those two. Like, you can not only build strength, but you can drastically build strength when you pay attention to those. If you just try to lift heavy in your sleep shit and your food shit, and you don't have awareness around those, dude, it's putting the cart before the horse. You're going to make, it's like trying to swim in quicksand. It's really, really hard. You're going to be frustrated. If you're a newbie, like, you'll get those newbie gains, but as soon as you get slapped by that plateau, that all of a sudden you face kind of like that first roadblock, dude, the shit's hard as hell. And you're going to be asking why. So I say all of that just to say, dude, focus on what you're fueling your body with first. Like, give yourself the best possible food that you possibly can. Create hyper awareness around how much protein you're consuming. We need to recover and repair the muscle tissue. And then also, you need to make sure, if you're one of those people that's like, it's not impossible, but I'm not a huge fan of like doing the keto and like doing the low carb and also trying to get strong and jacked. Like, it's really, really hard. Like, you can do it. It's not impossible, but man, use your energy's most preferred energy source, a resource through carbohydrate, right? Like, use that shit to your advantage, because people talk about the pumps, right? Like, and people feel like, oh man, you see a lot of people right now in the industry doing like the Rice Krispie treat thing, right? And it's just like quick, fast, readily digestible carbohydrate, glucose that you can use immediately in your workouts to help build muscle. And I would say that's first, dude. That's the thing that jumps first to mind is like, make sure you got your eating down. Make sure you're eating enough, right? Maintenance or into a surplus. If we're trying to build here and we're trying to get strong, now is not the time to like lean out, look super skinny, worry about your six pack right now. Like if you're trying to get jacked, if you take this step back to take 3 forward, promise you won't regret that. So that would be first. That would be the first thing I would just, and of course it's going to be different with every, I'm just generally speaking, but it, you know, if you want to get the biggest bang for your buck, focus on your food and your sleep. Those are like right up there, neck and neck. What about you, man? What do you think?
Yeah, dude, I was going to go in the same direction, and you talked about a lot of the same things I was going to. So I'll just kind of dive a little deeper.
That's how you know.
Yeah, right? No, it's like it's so key, right? And I think that's you talked about keto, and I think that's just not the best way to build muscle and get to the best. And honestly, I think at a certain point you start to do like detriment to your sleep and recovery when you're doing that, because it, like, carbs, for anybody out there who doesn't know, it's a huge fuel source, right? It's an amazing fuel source. And I think a lot of times when you say carbs, people's minds go to processed foods, right? And so I just wanted to also throw out the fact that there's a lot of amazing quality carbs out there that are not processed, right? It's like rice. There's a million types of different rice, right? Brown rice, white rice, jasmine. You know, there's a million types of white rice, like jasmine, basmati, like all these different things. Like you can get a lot of different kinds of rice, which is great. I love rice. I do different kinds of rice.
Me too.
Throughout the week. Potatoes. I think you're the one who got me onto the little potato company.
Yeah.
You just warm them up, and for 5 minutes in the microwave, like they're already basically, they're cooked potatoes. You must just be kind of warming them up again. But potatoes, right? There's red potatoes, sweet potatoes. There's veggies. Like veggies are a source of carbs. Obviously, they're not going to be loaded with carbs. Like a lot of the carbs are probably going to be fiber, fruits, veggies, stuff like that. Great sources of carbohydrates. Quinoa. There's different stuff out there. I just want people to know that there's a lot of great quality carbs that are going to have a lot of nutrients in them, that are going to help your body in other ways, that are going to help your body function in a better capacity. But carbohydrates as well, not just fuel, great for recovery, right? They're a huge recovery source. They're going to be what I like to call like the shut off to cortisol, right? When we're stressing our body, cortisol is going to be released, right? And cortisol is perfectly fine in small amounts. And like our body can actually come back stronger when we're stressing our body in small amounts. It's the fact of having stress that's prolonged throughout days and months and years that people really start to see their body break down and start to see a lot of struggles with recovery and sleep and you know, heightened stress and different stuff like that. And just, you know, hunger signals being just fucked up, and, you know, like being like really craving foods that aren't going to necessarily help you in the long run with all of this stuff. So those are kind of some things. And like protein wise, I think it's just huge, like protein. And don't, like, when it comes to protein as well, like obviously do what you need to get it in, but the more you can get from quality whole foods like meats, fish, Greek yogurt, eggs, stuff like that is going to be beneficial because they're going to have the nutrients you need. A lot of people will eat tons of protein bars and tons of scoops of protein powder. And although, like, if that's what you need to get it in, right? If you're a vegetarian or whatever it may be, if that's what you need to get it in, awesome, whatever. But like, you're going to definitely see that recovery is going to be better. You're going to feel better throughout the day. Life's going to be, you're not going to crave a lot of like the sugary foods. I've noticed with myself, and I don't know, I'd love to hear from you as well on this, but like when I am eating a lot more protein bars and I'm having a lot more scoops of protein powder in the past, I feel like it leads me to more processed foods as well, right? Where the other way around for me, if I'm eating more quality whole foods, like single ingredient foods, like I feel like it kind of, that builds me into more of those kind of foods as well. Like it's almost like I build momentum in one direction or the other. And that's not to say I don't mix those things in. Like I generally have a scoop of protein powder a day. I love to put it in like oatmeal, or like I use like cream of wheat right now is what I kind of have been using in place of oatmeal, because my body does not like oatmeal currently. But what's your opinion on that? Like what do you think when it comes to protein?
Yeah, dude, that's one of my go-tos every day is the cream of rice. I do cream of rice instead of cream of wheat. Same thing. It just digests better
Yeah, yeah.
with my stomach. And I think when you get to a certain point, it becomes very hard. It's very difficult to eat just like your entire day's worth of protein with chicken breast or, things like that. So if you do struggle with that, that's where, like Alex is talking about, bring in that supplementation because that's where it can help. Now, if you're relying on that, trying to hit your targets or, trying to make sure you got an adequate amount of protein, and it's not to say that it's bad, but you are missing a lot of the micronutrients in the single ingredient whole foods that are going to be packed. He's talking about these lean meat sources that are going to be huge building blocks when it comes to getting stronger, building muscle. So you don't want to miss out on those. You gave a ton of great examples too of both carbohydrate and proteins. And I like that we're going over this first because this is usually where like, especially guys will backtrack, meaning like they just want to hit the weights hard. They want to get better at it. Like they're gung ho in the gym, which is great. Like, and I love to see that, but it inevitably comes to a point where they hit a wall or they're like, man, I'm not making gain. I got past my newbie gain phase. And so they end up backtracking going, oh, well, maybe I should start paying attention to the stuff that actually moves me forward and helps me in the process, which is what we're talking about, having high quality nutrition, right? So, and I'm the same way. Like, dude, I'll throw processed shit in my diet all the time, but and I say like a really big but, the caveat with that is the majority of what I'm consuming, because I know how my body's going to perform and how it's going to feel when I have those single ingredient whole food sources, high quality carbohydrates, things that make me feel like I have rocket fuel when I'm training. Those are going to be totally different than me just eating processed crap. I still love it and I still have a place for those things in my diet. It's not perfect by any means, nor do I think anybody should. But I'll tell you, there's a huge difference of me eating some potatoes and feeling a pump, feeling my skin thick, feeling like I have energy to lift heavy and I feel strong. And then also from a recovery standpoint too, like you talked about, right? Like we're depleting our glycogen stores when we go in, we train with high intensity. And then not only did you need carbohydrate source for the energy of the actual workout, you're depleting those stores too. So post-workout, super important to be replenishing those. And so having an emphasis on both carbohydrates and protein is super, super important. We didn't even get into fats, but start with those two first and then just let your fats fall in where they do. And that's really going to get you super, super far. And we haven't even dived into the physical side of things yet, right? Like we're talking about how to skyrocket your lifts, get strong as shit, build some muscle. Like I'm glad we're bringing this up first because this is usually the topic that people are like, oh shit, I ran into a wall. Like there must be something else here that is going to help me, or like there's something that I'm doing wrong. Right. So then they try to lift heavier or train harder and they tweak something, they injure themselves. So they try to do more, like, let me start doing double days, or, let me start doing these workouts that I see this super jacked dude online do, thinking that like, that's the key. When in actuality, it's like, dude, you got to put the percentages in your favor, like, by making sure you're fueling yourself properly first and foremost. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. And I think that it's just like fat loss, right? Like a lot of people, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of people out there that they really prioritize that the whole movement side of things and the workout side of things. And they think that this is like 50% of the equation or 75% of the equation when it's really the smallest, like 5 to 10% of the equation. Right. It's like, and that's the same with this whole thing. Like if you want to really increase your lifts in the gym, if you want to really build muscle, the whole lifting side of things is important. I want to say it's probably more than the whole 5 to 10%, obviously, but like if you're neglecting your diet, if you're neglecting recovery, if you're neglecting a lot of these things we're going to talk about today, you're going to be in a rough spot. And so one other thing I wanted to say as well is like on the carb side of things, like, don't be afraid to push it. The more you are training, the harder you are training, the more carbohydrates you're going to need. It's not, so many people are afraid of carbs and it's literally, if you're listening to this podcast and you do want to increase your weights, fucking pound the carbs. Like, and not in a way that makes it so you feel like shit, and not in a way that you're doing it with all these processed foods, but also understand, for those of you who have to eat more food like me, Matt, you eat a good amount of food as well. Like it's going to be relatively impossible at a certain point, especially if you're bulking, if you're really in a surplus. It's going to be impossible for those to all come from quality foods at a certain level. So you got to understand that like the higher calories go, the less like quality foods you can consume. It's impossible. Like I've tried, trust me, I've tried to have hard. It come from, and it's like you'll get these big ass bowls or like these huge salads that are 500 calories. And if I'm like trying to build muscle, I have to eat like 4,700 calories a day. 500 calories is making the smallest fucking dent in that. And it's going to fill me up. Like I got to eat more. Like it gives you a lot of leeway though too, right? Like don't take that the wrong way. I'm just saying that you're going to have to get closer to maybe like a 60-40 split, right? Like 60% quality foods, 40% processed as you get really high in those calories. And so that's kind of there. And going into a different side of this. So we talked, diet, which is a part of recovery. What are some other things with recovery? Because I can't stress enough like how important the recovery side of it is to hit these PRs and to increase. Like it's number one, right? If you're not recovering, you're never gonna get there. And so what would you say is kind of on top of diet, what's the next part that these folks out there can dive into to help when it comes to recovery and increasing their weights?
I think it's the one thing that gets overlooked by everybody, especially brand new, just starting out, or even people that are a little bit seasoned. I think they don't put too much or as much emphasis in the recovery aspect as they should until here's one of two ways. Either you figure out that you're not recovering and you're going into each session just beat up, banged up, you're kind of dragging through it. That's not good, right? There's a time and place to do that, absolutely. But if you're doing that on a consistent basis, something's not right. And let's say if from a nutritional standpoint, you do have that dialed in, let's just make that assumption, and you are sleeping really well, but you're not recovering, meaning chances are I'd take a look at your volume, like your frequency, like how often are you training, or what's your program look like? Are you like smashing the same muscle groups, back-to-back days, and then it makes it so that you're not allowing yourself and your body to recover back to baseline? Because that's essentially what we're doing when we go in the gym. You're at this baseline, we're tearing ourselves down below, right? Trying to build resilience in what it is that we're doing, i.e. adding in external load and making things harder. And we tear ourselves down. It's in the actual recovery process where we bring ourselves back up to baseline and repair the tissue to make it more resilient, to then in turn repeat the process. So if you continue to tear yourself down below baseline and you never quite come back up and recover, you're just digging yourself deeper into a hole. So really the actual gains are truly made in the recovery. I wish everybody knew that, especially starting. If you put more emphasis in your recovery, you can almost be kind of sloppy with your training, meaning like your technique doesn't have to be all the way completely dialed in. Like you could probably, being a dude, you could probably lift some heavy shit and like, let's just assume you stay injury free and it's not just like the tightest form and technique and it's not even the best programming. But if you have it spaced out correctly and you do a great job recovering, like you can still see amazing results. Right. And so like I tell people that all the time. I'm like, don't be so focused on like trying to find the perfect program, especially if you're first starting. Like just do something, make sure you can get in there consistently, but more so importantly, start paying attention to the things that fly under the radar that really nobody's paying attention to. Everybody just wants to go in and smash weights, which is great. Like we all do, right? Especially guys, but not paying attention to or just brushing under the rug the recovery aspect of it. You're leaving so much on the table. It's like ridiculous. What do you think, man?
Oh, for sure. And, really, I love that you brought up volume. I think that's a huge thing. I know for me, I used to lift like 7 days a week, sometimes 2 a days, and my weights would get stagnant, right? Or they'd start to go down, right? I just wasn't recovering. And that's just a huge thing, controlling the volume, allowing yourself to come back fresh. Like you don't want to, there's going to be some days where you go into the gym, you don't feel good. I found that some of those days you can hit PRs. Even right? Like you
those are some of the best days,
being really good. But some other things to think about when it comes to recovery: sleep, right? Like sleep's the number one thing. If you're not sleeping, if you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night of shitty sleep, like it doesn't matter what you do. Like even throw away the food. Like it doesn't even matter what you do. you're not gonna really grow that much, right? It's just not gonna happen because sleep is where our bodies, like our cells regenerate, our bodies recover. It's literally where everything happens. Like that is where the shit happens. And so if you're struggling with sleep, I suggest putting a heavy emphasis on that. You could talk about hydration's another thing. Like that's going to help with sleep. That's going to help with recovery in general. If you're not hydrated, like it doesn't really matter what you do. You're probably not going to see the results that you could in the gym. So focus on those things. Focus on, some things I talked on a previous, I'm sure it was already released at this point when you're listening to this podcast. And also I just want to say to everybody out there, we're going to talk about the in-gym stuff as well. We're going to talk about like things to do in the gym to skyrocket your weights. Wait till the end for that. But these are really, really important because this is what people don't talk about. Like you've probably heard the stuff we're going to talk about at the end already by the millions of people out there who talk about this subject. But just this is where the gold's made. And I just wanted to say that, it's like with sleep, I've been struggling with my sleep. Like I've just had this broken sleep, and some of the things I'm doing, just to give you an idea of things you could work on outside of hydration, diet, dialing in your diet's going to be huge. What I've been doing is I've been keeping a consistent sleep schedule. So trying to go to bed and wake up around the same time, right? Like when it's all over the place, when the weekdays are different from the weekends, like it's tough for your body to get into that. Your circadian rhythm is just off, right? It's not going to be dialed in how it could. So I'm in the process of doing that. A nighttime routine, like having some sort of wind down at night where you're not just going from stress and work and watching a bunch of TV and doing this and that and on your phone and on your computer to trying to go to sleep. Your body, like if there's a lot of lights in your face and whatever, your body is going to think that it's still light out. It's going to think that it's still day. It's going to continue to run those processes that it's running during the day. When we shut the lights or we dim the lights a little bit, when we, maybe focus on maybe some meditation, or I like to do some light stretching at night. Like that's kind of my start of my nighttime routine is doing like a night yoga or just some light stretching, stuff like that that's kind of the signal for me that my body, I'm going to start to wind down, right? I'm going to start to get into bed. And then right before bed, I do some meditation. Nothing crazy. I do like a 5-minute just meditation, and then I do like a guided meditation in bed. And that kind of helps me kind of bridge the gap. But those are kind of some of the things I'm personally working with. It's going to be way different. I know we've talked about sleep on this podcast. For anybody out there, it's going to be different for you, but trying to shoot for at least 7 hours a night. That could be the first step for a lot of you out there. If you're like, oh, I'm getting 5 hours of sleep, that's not enough. I don't care who the fuck told you that was enough. Like there's people out there who don't talk about sleep and they're like, oh no, you don't have to sleep. Those people are fucking wrong. Like I've been in the place of not getting a lot of sleep or a lot of quality sleep. And I've been in the place of having like crazy good quality sleep. And it's crazy how much better my lifts were in the gym. It's crazy how much better I showed up. It's crazy how much more energy I had during my lifts and beyond afterwards. Like you're going to thank yourself later when it comes to like this importance. I know for a lot of guys, like this is something that you love doing, is getting in the gym and just seeing what you can push. And if you're a newbie, like I'm sure you're still the same way. You're like, I want to get up to those other guys at the gym that it's hard to not like look at some of these guys and be like, I want to be able to bench that much, or like I want to be able to squat that much. And you can. It's just going to be a process, and understanding that also, like Matt and myself, we've been both working out for over 10 years, right? Like straight, consistent, like and that's the type of thing that builds that muscle, and it becomes, at that point, it starts to become harder to hit PRs, right? But like at the same time, like that gives you a lot more leeway too.
That's a good point, dude. Like what you just brought up right there is like strapping yourself with the right mindset going into this. Like if you want to get strong as shit, you want to build muscle, you want to lift heavy weights, like quit having this arbitrary like end or like time frame in your head, because everybody's going to progress at different rates. Like don't compare yourself to your buddy if he's a little bit faster than you in terms of his progression and the weights that he's lifting. Like so many different things go into it. Like, and we could just, that's like a whole nother rabbit hole. But really just focusing on you, yourself alone, and how can you maximize these things outside of the gym that we're talking about that will drastically have you make leaps and bounds compared to the version of you that were just to like skip over these or like brush them under the rug. I know they don't sound like the sexy things, but they're things that are inevitable in your process that you may have to come back and address later down the road if you don't address them right off the jump. So that's the biggest thing, is like making sure that at some point you're going to have to address these things that we're talking about: recovery, proper fueling, making sure that you're putting yourself in a position to do this consistently and like not overdoing it with your body, and making sure that you can come back in and you're using the techniques that Alex just talked about. And especially with sleep hygiene, that's a huge one. You may be in bed for 7 to 8 hours, but you may have slept like 3 to 4 of it, right? Tossing and turning, stress is maybe a little bit high. So that could be a whole nother topic in itself, but just practicing little simple things like Alex was talking about, man, you'll set yourself up for success. And then you'll see the progression a lot more frequently than if you were to just neglect those things, or just to be like, oh, I'm not going to pay attention to them, or, oh, they're not that important. They aren't until they actually are, until you hit that roadblock, until you hit that speed bump, until you're like, or you know, I don't wish this upon anybody, but maybe you start getting some tweaks and some bangs and you start injuring yourself and your body's just kind of starting to break down. Those are clear signs and indication that, you know, something's missing here. So you have to go back and do some homework and be like, okay, where can I take care of my body a little bit better so that I can make it more resilient and allow it to adapt to the stimulus that I'm putting on it, which is, think about it, like we're coming into when we lift weights, we're doing damage to our body, right? We're coming in, we're purposely doing intentional damage to our muscle tissues. And so with that being said, there comes a recovery process with it too that's partnered, that has to be very, very upfront, and that has to be apparent before you just go in there and just think you're going to crush and smash weights all the time. You can, especially if you're young, like I'm sure you used to too, Alex. But I used to go in there and just sling it, dude. Like no warm-ups, no nothing, right? Like put it on, I'll hit it, especially like bench, right? Like that's a dude's thing, guy thing. But eventually at some point you start to go, okay, there's got to be a little bit more strategy here. I got to be more methodical with my approach. And especially if I want to do this long term, if I'm just trying to get there as fast as I can, you already are positioning yourself with the incorrect mindset in this whole thing. So, yeah, man, do you want to transition into the weight side of things and the actual physical side?
Well, kind of. So like, I think first off, like one more thing on this, and it's a bridge, right? So like what I want to talk about is how stretching, I mean, I think that's a huge thing for recovery, right? I think that's a really, really good thing. And then also warm-ups. So like kind of maybe we start with stretching here. Like, you know, I think this is something that so many people don't do. And I think you see it more with women, right? More women you see stretching and like kind of embodying that than I do men at the gym, right? You don't see a lot of, and so like, I think that's huge though. Like after your workouts, the last thing that I want to do after a workout, just crushing myself, is go to the turf or go somewhere and stretch. But I know that I feel so much better. I reduce the injuries. It helps with recovery so much to do that. And there's different ways you can do this. So what I like to do is I like to go to the turf at my gym. Maybe you don't have turf. Go to a corner, go to a mat, whatever it is, and just do some stretching. You do child's pose. Like yoga is a great mirror. If you know yoga poses, a great mirror, like lizard pose and child's pose and downward dog. Like all of these things are amazing recovery stretches that you can use. And so if you're confused on this, we're not going to demonstrate, but like I'm trying to give you names so that you can Google these things. Or if you do already know yoga, like you could Google, like what I'll do some days is right now I'm doing 4 workouts a week, and then I'm doing 3 yoga sessions a week. So I'm doing something every day. And a lot of times my yoga is recovery yoga. Well, it's like recovery-based yoga. It's stretches. It's different poses that are going to really help me with flexibility, with recovery, that stuff, right? And it's just so huge. As I do it more and more, I feel so much better. My body feels better, and it's amazing. But it's not something that enough people do, and it does play a big factor in to hitting PRs, because if you're not recovering, like we talked about, this is just kind of like that last piece of that recovery, is just making sure that you're doing that. What I'll do as well is I'll go in the sauna and I'll do stretches in the sauna. I'll do like I'll kind of like put my leg over my knee and I'll lean over, kind of the hip stretch, like the figure four, seated figure four stretch. I'll do like, just like, one of these, and kind of stretch everything in the sauna, stretch my hammies, whatever it is. But like that's a great thing too. You get the heat up a little bit. It's a great way to kind of lengthen those muscles too. And so what's your opinion on stretching, and then kind of dive that into like a good proper warm up of how you kind of go about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously stretching is super important. For one, everything that Alex said, but two, also making sure that your body is pliable and you can reach end ranges of motion. So for example, if we're talking about like a squat and you're trying to build your muscles in a squat, you have terrible ankle, knee, and hip flexibility, and you're trying to get in position. And let's say you're doing like these little quarter squats, which is probably pretty common. You go to a public gym, like you're going to see dudes in the squat rack not getting close to parallel or below, right? They're doing these quarter squats and they're loading a bunch of weight up, which is still going to build muscle, right? It's going to be, it's a movement that now turns into traditionally more very quad dominant. You're kind of just doing these little half squats, which are great, but you're missing out on so many different more ranges of motion and areas to strength and build muscle from. So range of motion is a huge thing. So where is your end range in each position that you're doing? If we're talking about compound lifts, and I mentioned a squat, but it's really with anything. So taking the time to be pliable, to be mobile, to be able to make sure that you can maximize your lifts is crucial. So yes, from a recovery standpoint, but two, also transitioning into the warm-up phase, making sure that you can hit different positions, again, to be able to maximize your lift and what you're doing. It's the difference between, let's say, for example, if you start to think that you can skip warm-ups, which this was me, like, back in the day, absolutely. I thought I could just skip a warm-up and jump to my sets, my working sets. What happens is let's say I have 4 working sets on the day. Let's say I have 4 sets of 5 on bench press. When I go into those 4 sets of 5, my first set is probably going to be a lighter weight than I would traditionally do if I went through a proper warm up. Like if I go through an actual warm up and I come in greased up, I'm sweating a little bit, my body's warm, I'm ready to go, my muscles feel activated. Like that first working set is going to be totally different than if I just kind of, I'm going to do the bar a couple times and then let's throw some weight on. And that was like light to moderate. So I'll call that my first set. Right. And so now the quality of those 4 sets versus if I do a true warm up and versus if I don't are going to be totally different. Now imagine if I do that over a month's period of time where I just skip a warm up. I count my first 2 sets as like, on paper, I say that they're working sets, but they were really light. And I was actually just kind of using them as a warm up. So really I only get set 3 and set 4 as a true working set. So really I only got 2 sets in, but I counted it as 4. So imagine if I do that across a month, 6 months, a year, how much I'm leaving on the table versus I come in, I pump some blood through the muscles that I'm about to work, right? And this could be something as simple as elevating the heart rate, not to the point where you're like overexerting yourself, but you're, couple word sentences where you might get out of breath just a little bit, but enough to elevate the heart rate. We're trying to warm the body up. And so when you can do that, make sure you can hit end ranges, meaning like if you need to go through some dynamic stretching and stretching positioning, like Alex was talking about before, go ahead and do that. But you want to prime yourself to go into the lift to the point where you're not counting your first, those warm-up sets as like your working sets. And if you could do that, you're going to get so much more out of it by getting 4 true, solid, challenging, but doable working sets versus the guy who skips his warm up, doesn't go into it as warm as he should, does the first 2 sets are shitty, just bullshit, don't even count, but he's counting them, and then gets kind of a 3rd set and then gets 1 working set on his 4th set, right? So you really didn't do shit when you look at the work capacity and the volume. And that comes simply just from skipping a warm up, right? Like, and not properly. And it could be something as simple as this, right? Like 5 to 10 minutes, pick a machine. If you're at a local or public gym, walk on the treadmill at a faster, like a brisk pace, right? You can even bump the incline up. 5 to 10 minutes on a stationary bike that, again, is not like a cruise in the park, but is just slightly above that. Something's going to, again, elevate the heart rate a little bit. That's the goal, is to elevate the heart rate. We're really trying to pump some blood through our body and just literally warm up, right? Make sure your tissues are pliable, ready to go. And then from there, it really just depends on the movement that you're going to do. I like doing let's use the bench press, for example, again. Think about the muscles that you're going to work going into the bench press that we're using here. So predominantly it's going to be chest, triceps, probably anterior delts, things like that, right? You can warm up really everything, but those are going to be the main primary movers. So go to something that you can use, whether you use bands or just some lightweight, and get some blood flow to those particular muscle groups. And you're going to feel so much better going into that first set. You're going to feel warm. You're going to have a little bit of a pump going on. And now you can truly, truly start adopting that first working set and get the most out of it. And so, like, for example, if you're trying to warm your triceps up, you can go over to a cable tricep machine and just individually like do some extensions, or you can just put the single handle on there, do some tricep extensions, and you're not like crushing yourself, but you do kind of want to get a little bit of a burning sensation going just so you're pumping the blood through there. And when you can do that with your shoulders, do that with some triceps, do that with your chest, maybe throw in some flies. If you have a band, you can do that too. But you're just trying to get the primary movers working and getting some blood flow to them. And then once you do that, then you can start moving into movement specific. So in this case, we're talking about a bench press. So then you can move over to the bench, and now you can start moving that empty barbell, right? But a lot of people just jump to the empty barbell, and that's like the first thing they do. And they haven't targeted the areas and the muscles, and they haven't warmed up their body yet. They're like treating that as their warm up. It's like, it's not good. It's not bad, but you'll see a difference if you spend 5-10 minutes on a cardio machine, go and isolate some muscle groups that you're really going to focus on your compound movement, and try to pump some blood through those for a couple sets, and then go over to the movement that you're going to do and begin your warm-up sets. You're going to get a totally different experience. And you're going to notice that your nervous system's ready to go. Your body's feeling, you're sweaty, you're greased up, your body's warm, and you're ready to rock. And you can imagine how much you're going to capitalize on your working sets and that movement, versus if you were to skip all of that and just like start throwing weight on and then just start moving it, right? So it's like jumping in cold. Again, not good or bad, but I just say it's less than optimal if you choose to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And you're risking injury a lot of times with that, right? You're gonna bring your percentage up at least, right? It's going to be a lot less if you're going in on a warm up. And I think use everything that Matt just said there. I think that's an amazing warm up. I'm a big mobility guy myself. I try to do like a full body mobility warm up. And I'm fortunate. I live right down the street from my gym. And so I actually do it right here, right behind me. I'll do a full body, shoulders, ankles, hips, everything, just every day before I go to the gym. I'll get a full body mobility session. And you can actually, for anybody out there as well, like we said, Matt gave some good examples. For mobility, I think mobility is huge for recovery, but also for like just being able to, like you said, move within the range, or like lift within a larger range of motion, which is only going to be more beneficial for really everything. And I've seen, for me, a lot less soreness. I've seen just a lot of benefits when it comes to my increases in weight, just a lot of different things with a consistent mobility session. And you can find a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. I'm a huge YouTube guy. Like, there is a lot of good follow along stuff on there that you can use, or just you can get exercises on there that are really, really good. Just look for the really high view videos, and generally they're going to be pretty good for the most part. So let's get in. What do you say? Get into the thing that people probably really want to hear. They're like, fuck you guys for talking about recovery and sleep and hydration and all this stuff. But I mean, guys, that is really, really important. What we just talked about, like that is like, if you're hitting plateaus and shit, like in your, like, do all those things we talked about. Focus on dialing in your diet, making sure you're eating enough. Like, you got to eat enough if you want to increase your weights. If you continue to eat in a calorie deficit, you're not going to increase your weights very much, unless if you're new to it. Yeah. Like you might a little bit if it's a new exercise. Sure, you might see some different increases, but make sure you're eating enough. Make sure that you're eating, quality foods. Make sure that you're staying hydrated. Get electrolytes in if you're sweating a lot. Get protein. Make sure you're upwards or close to a gram per pound of body weight. Reduce, manage your volume in the gym. Like, don't be going 7 days a week unless if you're doing small workouts. Like, make sure that you're maybe sticking in within like around that 5 a week if you can, 3 to 5, depending on what you're doing, like what kind of program you're doing is generally what I think the sweet spot is for people, the volume that's going to allow you to push some heavy fucking weight and also recover from it. You want to at least have that day or two of rest on your body, which is huge. And then, we talked about stretching. We talked about getting a good just warm up in with 5 to 10 minutes on some sort of machine, some sort of, just some sort of movement based on what you're doing that day. What Matt talked about, I talked about mobility, and now going into the actual gym. So you've done the warm up, you're doing all this stuff. Matt, what would you say to everybody? I know this is your fucking jam. First off, you're the program designer. You're the, like, what are some things that everybody out there can do to help skyrocket their weights, hit those PRs in the gym when it comes to the actual session?
Yeah, I think if you want to skyrocket how strong you are and put on mass as quickly as possible, although we know it's not a quick process, the thing that will shortcut and really get you moving along is focusing on the compound lifts. You have to, because they're so functional in terms of that you're working multiple muscle groups in one movement. So if you just go and try to maximize, like everybody wants to go do bicep curls, like that's great. Those are phenomenal. But if you're doing those in place of like a row, for example, right? Like a heavy row where you're also working biceps, you're working lats, you're working a lot more than just an isolated muscle group. So I think the compound lifts are essential. And we're just talking about bench, squat, deadlift, pull, and then some sort of vertical press, right? Throw that in there as well too. So if you can get your bases covered with those on your sessions during the week, I think that those need to be pillars in your sessions, and you need to get better and get hungrier at wanting to improve on those things. I think everybody thinks about like bench, and some bros will try to stay away from the squats, right? And like, so it's, yes, those are two movements, but also don't neglect like your pulling and your pressing too, both vertical and horizontal, pulling and pressing. And when you can put all of those and encompass those in a kind of beautiful laid out program, even a shitty program, but if you just focused on those, like, you're gonna see improvements, you're gonna see gains. Now it's your attention to detail and what encompasses those, the surrounding movements, the accessory work that surrounds those. You can start to get really creative with that. And then it will also break down to the frequency. And this all depends on the training age, like how long and what's your experience with the lifts, right? Like, are you somebody who's just getting into it? Start off with a couple days a week, right? If you're somebody who's pretty seasoned and you're training like 6-7 days a week and you're not seeing gains, you probably need to take your foot off the gas a little bit, right? And find like that 3 to 4 day sweet spot. Cause like we talked about, that rest and recovery is going to be crucial for you. So it depends on where you're at. But I think having the compound lifts somewhere at the top or in the front of your workout, whatever you're doing, for one, because they're going to take, yes, you get the biggest bang for your buck, but they're the most demand on the body too. They're the most stressful. They're the most strenuous. So they're going to take a lot of energy. I'm a huge fan of, like, if you, want to pre-fatigue, right? That's really popular. Like kind of what I was talking about from the warm up, so to speak. Like if you want to do like some hack squats before you do your barbell squat, you want to go do some leg extensions and some hammy curls before you go into your squats. That's very popular too. But making sure that wherever you choose to put those compound lifts, you're not neglecting them. They're not like just missing from your workout program. Like those should be the pillars. Those should be the foundations. And then what you choose to do around that, I mean, we could go so many different avenues and it depends on the individual. But yeah, man, if you want to get strong, you want to get jacked, like focus on the compound lifts, because they're going to give you, they're going to accelerate your process, right? You're working multiple muscle groups versus you just jumping straight to isolation and working just your chest or just your shoulders or just your triceps. Like those stuff should be plugged into and encompassed in more of an umbrella approach that is really supportive around those major compound lifts. So that's first and foremost, man. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I know. I love everything you said there as well. And I think mastering those compound lifts, I'll even take it to a next level, right? Like not only just doing the compound lifts, like really getting that form down when it comes to growth, right? We're talking about skyrocketing your weights. Like a lot of times, like people want to get big, right? Or they want to get stronger. Like that growth comes from mastering the form and making sure that we're actually we're hitting the muscle we're trying to hit. Because you get a lot of times what people do, sure, they can move a lot of weight on the bench, but they're hitting all shoulders, or they're hitting, they're not even hitting their chest, right? So like if we can get that form down and we're actually hitting the muscle group we're trying to hit, that muscle group's going to grow, right? And then when it comes to actually like hitting PRs and stuff, I would challenge people to not just view PRs as a weight, right? I think sometimes like viewing them as reps and stuff, different rep PRs, like, oh, I hit a 3-rep PR today, I hit a 6-rep PR today, whatever it is. And also understanding that, if we can somehow increase each week, or, it gets harder as you go, understanding that like the more you work out, it's going to get harder to hit those PRs. It's going to be harder to progress those workouts, but whatever you can do, can I hit another rep this week on the bench? Can I get another 2.5 pounds or 5 pounds on my bench? Can I get one more set in? Like whatever it is, there's a lot of different ways that we can progress these workouts. Also, one thing I love to do is low, like just like if you really want to progress, like let's just take the bench, for example, right? Let's do slow negative and pause at the bottom. Like if you're doing that, like, and you have more time under tension, not only is that going to help you grow, but it over time, you're going to see when you do go to like a regular rep again, it's going to be a lot easier because you've been doing these slow ass reps. You've been doing pauses at the bottom. So you're going from a dead stop, and you do that on anything. That's a great way to grow. It's a great way to increase your lifts. It's a great way if you don't have access to as much weight to be able to get a lot more bang for your buck out of, like, if you just have up to 55-pound dumbbells or something at your house, like you have some adjustable dumbbells, there's going to be certain things that you're limited in. So you're going to want to use slow negatives within a goblet squat. You're going to want to use pauses at the bottom. You're going to want to like really like use these type of different ways to put time under tension so that you can grow and increase those weights.
Yeah. And like to kind of take that to a different level too, is like being able to progress, there has to be a certain amount of intensity. So you brought up a great thing saying tempo, right? Like if you're limited on weights, is a great example. Or if you just need to change up your routine, you need to move the weight slower to get that time under tension. That's a great way to do it. You should be focusing on, that's why I love going off an RPE spectrum, rate of perceived exertion, versus a percentage based. So for example, if you come in and you're trying to bench press and you have programmed 70 to 75% for your sets, and then you're going to progress to 80, 85%, that may look different on any given day. Like maybe your sleep wasn't good. Like maybe you haven't been hydrating. Maybe you didn't get enough carbohydrates. So that 85% can look different on Tuesday than it does on Thursday, and it'll feel different. So I'm a huge fan of, okay, if the given is that we have to lift at a certain intensity here to be able to elicit a certain response from our body, to be able to become resilient to what we're doing to it, then we have to have some sort of approach here where we can create some consistency. To even your point, like you're saying, like maybe it's not the weight that changes, but it's the rep, or maybe it's the form that changes, or maybe I do it with a little bit longer tempo or a little bit longer pause. Whatever you choose to do and whatever's inside your programming, there has to be intensity there. You can't just go through the motions and like check the box and like wonder why you're not getting strong or wonder why you're not building muscle. And this is very hard to explain to somebody that's very new, because they might not have they're not going to have the cognitive awareness. They're not going to have the nervous system development yet. They're not going to have the training experience to be able to lift at a certain intensity, right? It's going to be very hard for them. They're still trying to get the motor pattern down. They're still trying to develop the movement. So them loading on a bunch of weight that's going to challenge them, and they don't have the mechanics down yet, it's going to be irrelevant for them, right? So that person's going to have to stay lighter. But I'm assuming that people that we're talking to are a little bit seasoned here. Let's just assume that you're not fresh off the couch lifting and you have some experience here and you've been doing this for a while, but you feel like you're stuck. And if I watch your sets, and let's just say we're doing 10 repetitions, and I watch you finish rep 10, and rep 10 looks just like rep 1 in terms of difficulty, like there's a problem there, right? That means that you're just going through the motions. Like if you finished 10, you could have done another 10 if I asked you to go, but you just stopped because you were at rep 10 and that's what was prescribed. there's a problem there. That's a warm-up set, right? And so I think really, really diving in and distinguishing the difference between a working set and a warm-up set. Now, I'm not saying like go to failure, right? There's actually study and data showing that it's more beneficial to go just before failure than there is actually pushing beyond failure. There's a time and a place to do that too. But if you want to train more with more frequency and have better recovery and do this for longevity, you don't have to go to failure. But the caveat to that is you have to push, man. You have to exert yourself. You have to lift with intensity, meaning like you have to give effort. And that's one thing that from a coaching's perspective, it's very hard to gauge on people. But it's very easy to see if you look over their months of progression in their programming, like, oh, this person's been at the 10-pound dumbbells for the last 2 months. Like, okay, some shit's wrong here. Like they either don't have access to heavier weight or they're just going through the motions and checking the box and saying like, oh yeah, I completed my 10 reps today, versus the person that is pushing to rep 10 and they might have been able to do like 1 or 2 more reps, 3 at most. Like that's an awesome set. And they were able to maintain their form. The intensity was there. They had to push. Like you absolutely have to push on your sets. So intensity is huge. Like you have to be able to make it hurt. Like it has to be tough. It has to be challenging, but doable with good form. And assuming you're not injuring yourself, we want to make sure you're moving well, but man, you got to push yourself. That's one thing that's big with me, and especially guys who are trying to, and gals that are trying to build muscle. It's like, film your set. I want to see your set. Like I have prescribed here for you 10 repetitions. I want to see what your set looks like based on this weight that you say you're doing. Send it over to me. I like to look at my client's film and just break it down. And I'll tell them like, hey, no, you have more left in the tank. Your form looks good. I need you to add more weight onto that. Or they'll send it over and I'll be like, damn, you hit that stimulus perfect. Like that looked like a challenging set. Like you pushed it there and you might have had a rep or 2 left. I know those last couple of reps were challenging and you definitely pushed it. And so that's why I like to look at film. Film will do wonders. If you film yourself and doing your lifts, you might think it's difficult and you look at your film and it looks like, oh, you're just warming up, like set 1 or rep 1 looks just like your last one. Man, like in terms of intensity and difficulty, like you can probably put some more weight on there. So that's huge. That's something that like watch people who are jacked, watch people who are in shape, watch people who have a significant amount of muscle mass and they're super strong. They're not just checking the boxes when they're going through the motions on their workouts and on their lifts. Like they're lifting heavy shit, and there's a certain intensity there that has to be developed over time, of course. If you're brand new, you're probably I would exclude you from this information. But if you have any sort of training experience, the intensity is so key. And of course, I say all that just to say you have to perform it with correct form and technique, and we're not injuring ourselves. But man, effort is huge.
Yeah, make some fucking faces in the gym.
Dude, yeah,
don't be afraid. Like honestly, I make some weird ass faces in the gym.
Oh, bro,
that shows you're pushing it, right? Like pushing it. Like you said, not go to failure, right? Like you can go to failure here and there. Like there are certain things I'll go to failure, but like leaving a few reps in the tank is a good way to kind of go about it. You know, if you can shoot to leave two reps in the tank, like you'd have 2 struggle reps left. Like that's generally where I like to sit. Like where I'm
that's
close
a quality
to failure.
set.
Yeah, it's a great set. You're going to be able to recover a lot easier from that. If you're doing failure all the time, you're going to probably have to do less workouts throughout the week because it's going to be harder.
Unless you're on gear, unless you're on juice. Like if you're juice and you can recover like a madman, like And that's the tough thing too, right? People see those guys and they're like, oh, well, so-and-so's doing it and they're super jacked. I'm like, yeah, they're on a ton of drugs too. So they recover like nobody's business. That whole first segment that we talked about, like they like that recovery aspect for them on people who are on performance enhancing drugs and steroids, like, dude, their recovery, their ability to recover is so fast and so enhanced that's why they can continue to lift and train the way that they do. So like, make sure, take that with a grain of salt when you're watching people on social media. Is like, there's going to be guys that are advanced in different stages in their career and they're probably on some shit, and you can't just assume, but you also have to know, like, if somebody's super, super jacked, they might be using something to help them. And so they're allowed to train a certain way too. Like if you see them going to failure frequently, it's because they have a different ability to recover when they're on some stuff too.
Yeah. And if you see them working out 7 days a week, right? Like that, like that's
Yeah.
like you see some of these guys, they're at the gym every time you go there.
Seriously.
Right? It's like it's you go in the morning, they're there. You go in the evening, they're there. You're like, does this guy leave? Does he have a cot in the back?
Right.
It's literally those guys. They're probably on steroids, and like you probably shouldn't do that. And the last thing I would say though is like track your workouts, guys. Like it's literally that's a great way. If you don't track your workouts, like you're gonna just be guessing. Right. And I love to do this. I do this with my notes app. Like I have my workouts, like I have a program for myself each day of the program. And then I'll just make a new line with the date, and like, okay, this is what I did that day. Like, this is the numbers that I did. Oh, I can see the day before. Last week I did this much. Okay. Let's see if we can get a little bit more. Let's see if we can push it this week. And you'll be able to feel it out. Maybe you don't have it this week, but you'll be able to feel it out as you go. Oh, fuck yeah, I got it this week. Like I can hit a little bit more. Like challenge yourself. Like that's the fun. Yeah. That's the fun part about this. Challenge yourself. And also like don't skip legs. Don't be that guy. Don't be that person that skips legs.
Don't be that dude.
Fucking legs. Like bro. Don't be this scrawny ass leg person walking around. Like I literally legs is my favorite thing ever. That's why
all
I do.
Top, no bottom. Legs is my favorite too, bro. I fucking love it. It's hard. It challenges you mentally. Yeah.
You fucking have to. Are legs your favorite? I have this theory that I just thought of the other day. Because I was like, okay, legs are my favorite. And then there's certain things that I really love doing. And it's all revolves around what your best weights are. Like I think it's like,
for sure.
Which things can you fucking hit high
for sure?
It's like that's what my legs are. Really, I can hit some high weights when it comes to like RDLs and like backwards barbell lunges and like stuff like the reverse lunges and stuff like that. Like these kind of a little bit more obscure leg exercises. Like I got a lot of weight in the tank. And so I think that's like why it feels really good, but also like it just comes from like doing it a lot. Like we were forced during sports, you're forced to do for baseball, especially like it's a lot of leg shit. Baseball, it's all legs. And so like for 4 years in college, forced to do the program and forced to push it super hard. And so like that period of time, like I'm very grateful for when it comes to like just my whole development as a lifter. Cause I know that without that, that's just such a big base to have, because that's what like we talk about, not comparing yourself to other people. You don't know what they're doing. They could be on shit, but also they could have been doing it for 30 years or 20 years.
You never know, right?
It's just different, right? There's different people have been doing different things. You may be new. It's going to take a while. You're going to see the newbie gains, but it's very difficult to get up to some of these weights that some people are at, because people have just been lifting for so long. And so that's kind of what I wanted to leave people with. You got anything else to wrap this up?
Last thing I would add is just a mind muscle connection. We didn't talk about that much, but like literally focusing on what it is that you're working, you can tap in. It's the difference between like if I'm doing some lateral raises with some dumbbells, it's the difference between, again, checking the box with a set, or am I focused with intentionality, thinking about what muscles I'm using to literally move this weight from A to B. And when you really dive into that and you start to feel the muscles that you're working, you can engage them really well. You can fatigue them purposely with intent. That's a totally different level. I actually have a couple clients on that in that stage in their journey right now, working on that. And you start to see their weights jump up, because now it's no longer like, oh, let me make this set hard. Like they got that part down, what we were talking about. Like, let me lift with intensity. Let me lift with effort. Let me lift with focus. But now I want you to think about the muscle groups that you're actually working, like why I prescribed these for you, why you're doing them. And then as you're performing the movement, I want you to think about the muscles that you're trying to strengthen here. And when you do that, it opens up this whole other door, this brand new ball game. And it's like giving you little nuggets to get a little bit better. Like you said, like it's fun. Like you get a little bit stronger. You're comparing your numbers from the previous time. There's going to be times where you feel like shit. There's going to be times you feel really good when you come into the gym and you're like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of that today. Dump that focus into what it is that you're actually doing. Don't be on your phone. Don't be looking at the girl across the gym while you're doing your set. Like think about what you're doing, the movement at hand, focus on the task, And man, there's so many untapped gains that are in there when you can do it. And you start to see your weight climb, you start to see your strength climb because you're just focusing on it. You're giving it intention. You're lifting with a purpose versus just like, oh yeah, that set was hard, but I'm done. I kind of just rack my weights and I'll move on. It's like, well, do you even know what muscle groups you're working there? Like, what was your intention there? Could you moved a little bit better on one of your reps? Like, really dive in and get intricate with it. That's like advanced, you're starting to get advanced here, but that would be like one of the later stages. And so if you're in that position of you need to take it to another level, tapping into that mind muscle connection and focusing on what you're working, I think is huge.
Yeah, man. I don't got anything else. I think that's great. I think this was an awesome episode. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like it. Leave us a comment on YouTube. Share it with somebody who you think could benefit from it. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that that are in the gym trying to get better. I'm sure there's something in this, a little nugget that they could take that will help them. So make sure you share it with them. We appreciate you all listening, watching on a weekly basis. And I appreciate you, Matt.
Thanks, brother.